13 years of silence shattered in a single phone call. My aunt's trembling voice delivered news that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. Serafina, your sister Miranda has been stealing from your grandmother's estate for over a decade. The woman who convinced everyone I was the family disgrace, who turned my parents against me, who made me the scapegoat for every family problem, had been living a lie built on theft and manipulation. Before we dive into this incredible story of family betrayal and ultimate justice, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, smash that like button, and don't forget to subscribe because this tale of revenge is about to get absolutely wild. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March, exactly 13 years and 4 months since my family had completely cut me off. I was sitting in my small apartment in Portland, nursing my morning coffee, and preparing for another day at the nonprofit where I worked as a social worker, when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Serafina, this is your Aunt Catherine. The voice was older, frailer than I remembered, but unmistakably my father's sister. My heart nearly stopped. Catherine had been the only family member who'd shown me any kindness during the nightmare that led to my exile, but even she had eventually gone silent under family pressure. Aunt Catherine, how did you get my number? Is everything okay? My voice came out smaller than I intended, years of hurt and confusion still raw despite the time that had passed. Honey, I need to tell you something important. About Miranda. About what really happened 13 years ago. Her voice carried a weight that made my stomach drop. I'm dying, Serafina. Cancer. And I can't take this secret to my grave. The story that unfolded over the next hour shattered every assumption I'd held about my family's betrayal. It started with my grandmother's death, 15 years earlier, and her substantial inheritance, which included property investments and a considerable cash settlement. Miranda, as the eldest grandchild and the family's golden child, had been given power of attorney over the estate's management. What nobody knew was that Miranda had been systematically draining the accounts for years. Small amounts, at first, carefully concealed among legitimate expenses. But as her gambling addiction grew worse and her lifestyle became more expensive, the thefts became bolder. By the time I was 23 and living at home while finishing my master's degree, Miranda had stolen nearly $200,000. She needed a scapegoat, Catherine explained, her voice breaking. When your parents started asking questions about the missing money, Miranda convinced them it was you. She had access to your personal information, your bank accounts, everything. She made it look like you'd been forging checks and making unauthorized withdrawals. The memory of that horrible confrontation came flooding back. My parents sitting me down in the living room, their faces cold and disappointed. The accusations, the evidence Miranda had carefully planted the way my desperate denials only seemed to confirm their suspicions. My father's voice cutting through my protests. We trusted you, Serafina. We gave you everything, and you stole from your own grandmother's memory. But why didn't anyone believe me? Why didn't you say something? The pain in my voice was evident even to me. Catherine's sob carried across the phone line. Because Miranda was so convincing. She cried, she showed us bank records, she had explanations for everything. And you? Honey, you'd always been the rebellious one, the one who questioned family traditions. When Miranda suggested you might be acting out because of jealousy over her engagement, it seemed to make sense to everyone. That engagement, Miranda's picture-perfect relationship with David, the wealthy lawyer's son, who came from old money, their lavish wedding that I wasn't invited to funded, I now realized with stolen money. The perfect house, the luxury cars, the expensive vacations that everyone praised her for achieving through her hard work in real estate. She's been living a complete lie this entire time, Catherine continued. The real estate career that supposedly made her rich. She barely sold anything. Most of her income came from continuing to steal from various family accounts she still had access to. Your cousin Michael's college fund, your uncle's medical savings, even money meant for family reunions and holiday gatherings. The cruelest part was learning how thoroughly Miranda had manipulated everyone's emotions. She'd positioned herself as the victim of my supposed betrayal, the caring sister who was heartbroken by my actions, but willing to forgive if only I'd confess and make amends. When I refused to admit to something I hadn't done, she tearfully told the family that my stubbornness proved my guilt and my lack of remorse. Your parents haven't spoken your name in years, Catherine admitted. Miranda convinced them that even mentioning you would be enabling your destructive behavior. She said the only way to help you was through tough love, by cutting you off completely until you were ready to take responsibility. 13 years of birthdays, holidays, and family milestones missed. 13 years of building a life completely separate from the people who raised me. 13 years of wondering what was wrong with me that my own family could believe I was capable of such betrayal. How did you find out the truth? I asked, my hands shaking as I gripped the phone. David filed for divorce 6 months ago. He hired forensic accountants to examine their finances, and they found irregularities going back over a decade. When they started digging deeper, they discovered the pattern of theft from family accounts. David brought the evidence to me because he knew about the original accusations against you. My sister's perfect marriage was crumbling, and finally the truth was coming to light. But Catherine's next words hit me like a physical blow. Serafina, there's more. Miranda has been intercepting your letters and emails to the family for years. Birthday cards, Christmas messages, even the letter you sent when you graduated from your master's program. She convinced your parents that you were only reaching out to manipulate them and ask for money. I had sent dozens of attempts at communication over the years, each one carefully crafted to show growth, maturity, and genuine remorse for whatever I might have unknowingly done to hurt them. I'd assumed their silence meant they truly wanted nothing to do with me. Your mother cried for weeks after your graduation, Catherine revealed. She wanted to call you, but Miranda showed her a fake email where you supposedly said you didn't want them at the ceremony because you were ashamed of them. None of it was real. The scope of Miranda's deception was breathtaking. She hadn't just stolen money. She'd stolen 13 years of family relationships, carefully maintaining her position as the beloved daughter while ensuring I remained isolated and blamed. What happens now? I whispered. Now, Catherine said firmly. It's time for the truth to come out. I have copies of all the evidence, and I'm going to make sure your parents see it. Miranda's world is about to come crashing down, and you, my dear, are going to get the justice you've deserved all along. The week following Catherine's revelation was a blur of conflicting emotions. Relief at finally knowing the truth, warred with rage at 13 years of stolen time, while hope battled against the deep-seated fear that my family might still choose Miranda over me. I took 3 days off work, something I'd never done without being genuinely ill, and spent them processing the magnitude of my sister's betrayal. Catherine had promised to present the evidence to my parents within the week, but I knew I needed to prepare for any outcome. 13 years of independence had taught me to rely only on myself, and despite the vindication the truth offered, I wasn't ready to trust that my family would simply welcome me back with open arms. I decided to document everything. Every memory from those final weeks before my exile, every attempt at communication I'd made over the years, every birthday and holiday I'd spent, wondering what I'd done wrong. If there was going to be a reckoning, I wanted to be prepared with my own truth. The most painful part was reviewing the letters I'd saved copies of the ones I'd sent to my parents over the years. Reading them now with the knowledge that Miranda had intercepted them all was like reopening old wounds. My 25th birthday letter, where I'd begged them to tell me what I could do to earn their forgiveness. The Christmas card from year 7, where I'd included photos of the community center I'd helped build, hoping they'd be proud of the person I was becoming. The letter I'd sent when I won an award for my work with homeless youth, desperately wanting to share my achievements with the people who'd raised me. Miranda had made sure they saw none of it. Catherine called again on Friday with an update that both thrilled and terrified me. I met with your parents yesterday. It took 3 hours, but they've seen all the evidence now. Your mother hasn't stopped crying, and your father, well, he's angrier than I've ever seen him. What did they say about me? They're devastated, honey. 13 years of believing their youngest daughter was a thief and a liar, 13 years of missing out on your life because they thought they were protecting the family from you. Your mother kept asking how they could have been so blind. But there was more. Catherine had also reached out to other family members who'd been affected by Miranda's theft. My cousin Michael, now 31, and struggling with student loan debt because his college fund had been depleted. Uncle Robert, who'd been forced to delay his retirement because his medical savings had mysteriously vanished. Even my grandfather's brother, who'd wondered for years why the family cemetery maintenance fund never seemed to have enough money despite regular contributions. Miranda stole from everyone, but she was careful to make it look like mismanagement or honest mistakes. She'd blame bank errors, claim investments had gone bad, anything to avoid suspicion. But when you add it all up, she's stolen close to $500,000 over 15 years. The number was staggering. $500,000 that should have gone to education, medical care, retirement, security, and family memories. Instead, it had funded Miranda's facade of success and her escalating gambling problem. Catherine had also uncovered the extent of Miranda's manipulation tactics. She'd kept detailed records of every family interaction, carefully crafting narratives to maintain control. When family members expressed doubt about my guilt, Miranda would produce new evidence of my supposed wrongdoing. When anyone suggested reaching out to me, she'd share fabricated stories about my supposed response to previous attempts at contact. She told your uncle that you'd changed your name and didn't want to be found, Catherine revealed. She told your cousin Sarah that you'd said the family was toxic and you were better off without them. Every story was designed to make reconciliation seem impossible. But perhaps the most insidious part of Miranda's scheme was how she'd positioned herself as the family's protector and healer. She'd organized family gatherings, always making sure to mention how much better things were without the drama I supposedly caused. She'd sent thoughtful gifts and cards on behalf of herself and her husband, reinforcing her image as the caring, successful daughter who'd stepped up in difficult times. She even convinced your parents to change their will, Catherine admitted. Everything that would have been split between you and Miranda now goes entirely to her. That revelation hit differently than the rest. It wasn't about the money, although the financial security would have been life-changing for someone who'd built their career in nonprofit work. It was about what the will represented, the final legal proof that my parents had written me out of their lives completely. Catherine's next words offered hope, though. David's divorce attorney wants to pursue criminal charges for the theft. With the amount of money involved and the length of time over which it occurred, Miranda could face serious prison time. But they want victim impact statements from everyone who was affected. This was my chance for justice, but it also meant a decision point. I could continue living my quiet, independent life in Portland, secure in the knowledge that the truth had finally come out. Or I could actively participate in holding Miranda accountable, which would mean fully re-engaging with the family trauma I'd spent over a decade trying to heal from. I thought about the social work clients I'd helped over the years, people who'd been betrayed by the systems and families that should have protected them. I thought about the advice I'd given them about standing up for themselves, about not letting injustice go unchallenged. How could I ask them to be brave if I wasn't willing to be brave myself? I want to write a victim impact statement, I told Catherine, and I want to be involved in whatever legal proceedings happen next. Are you sure, honey? This is going to get ugly. Miranda isn't going to go down without a fight, and she's had years of practice manipulating family dynamics. I'm sure. 13 years ago, I was young and overwhelmed and didn't know how to fight back effectively. But I'm not that person anymore. I've spent over a decade helping other people navigate systems that failed them. I think it's time to use those skills for myself. Catherine's relief was audible. Your parents want to see you, Serafina. They're afraid you'll never forgive them, but they desperately want the chance to apologize and try to rebuild something with you. The possibility of reconciliation was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure, but I knew it couldn't happen until Miranda faced real consequences for what she'd done. Justice first, then healing. The criminal investigation moved faster than anyone expected. David's divorce attorney had been thorough in documenting Miranda's financial crimes, and when the district attorney's office reviewed the evidence, they immediately opened a formal investigation into what they classified as aggravated theft and fraud, spanning multiple victims and more than a decade. I found myself in the surreal position of being interviewed by detectives about crimes I'd been falsely accused of committing 13 years earlier. Detective Sarah Rodriguez, the lead investigator, was a woman about my age with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude that reminded me of some of my best social work supervisors. "This is one of the most elaborate schemes I've seen," she told me during my second interview. "Your sister didn't just steal money. She orchestrated a comprehensive campaign to destroy your relationship with your family while positioning herself as the victim. The psychological manipulation here is as criminal as the financial theft." The investigation revealed layers of Miranda's deception that even Catherine hadn't fully understood. Miranda had created fake email addresses to impersonate me, sending inflammatory messages to family members designed to make reconciliation impossible. She'd forged my signature on documents that supposedly showed me accessing accounts I'd never even known existed. She'd even hired a private investigator to monitor my activities for the first few years after my exile, gathering information she could use to discredit any attempts I might make to reconnect with the family. "She was building a case against you from day one," Detective Rodriguez explained. "Every piece of evidence was carefully constructed to support her narrative that you were unstable, vindictive, and dangerous to the family's well-being. But Miranda's biggest mistake had been her assumption that she could control the narrative forever. When David filed for divorce and hired forensic accountants, he'd done so to protect his own assets, not to expose Miranda's crimes against my family. He'd genuinely believed that Miranda was wealthy from her real estate career, and discovering that their lifestyle had been funded by stolen money had been as shocking to him as it was to everyone else. "David's been extremely cooperative," Detective Rodriguez informed me. "He's provided financial records going back to the beginning of their marriage, and he's agreed to testify about conversations where Miranda admitted to manipulating family dynamics to maintain access to various accounts." The most devastating revelation came from Miranda's own communications. Police had obtained warrants for her phone and computer records, uncovering years of text messages and emails that revealed the true extent of her manipulation. Messages to her gambling associates about her family money well that she could tap whenever she needed cash. Emails to friends bragging about how easy it was to control family narratives. Most damning of all, a recorded conversation with a friend where Miranda laughed about how pathetic I was for continuing to send letters that she simply threw away. "She documented her own crimes," the detective said with amazement. "It's like she was so confident in her control over the situation that she never considered the possibility of being caught." My parents' reaction to learning the full scope of Miranda's betrayal was devastating to witness. Catherine arranged for us to meet at her house, a neutral location, where we could begin the painful process of reconciliation. I arrived 30 minutes early, my hands shaking, as I sat in my car outside the familiar neighborhood where I'd spent so many childhood holidays. When my mother saw me, she collapsed, literally fell to her knees in Catherine's driveway, sobbing apologies that had been building up for 13 years. My father, the stoic man who'd raised me to believe that emotions were private things, wept openly as he tried to explain how thoroughly Miranda had convinced them of my guilt. "She had answers for everything," he said, his voice broken. "Every time we had doubts, every time we wanted to reach out to you, she had new evidence or a new reason why it would be dangerous for the family. She made us believe we were protecting everyone by staying away from you." The hardest part was learning about the moments they'd wanted to reconnect, but had been manipulated away from it. My college graduation, where they'd actually driven to the campus, but left after Miranda convinced them that showing up would be enabling my manipulative behavior. My 30th birthday, when my mother had written me a long letter but never sent it, because Miranda claimed to have inside information that I was telling people they were abusive parents. Christmas mornings when they'd set aside gifts for me, only to put them away after Miranda's latest manipulation. "We failed you," my mother whispered, holding my hands like she was afraid I'd disappear again. "Our job was to protect you, and instead we let her turn us into weapons against you." But the reunion also revealed how much we'd all changed. I wasn't the idealistic 23-year-old who'd been destroyed by their accusations. I was a confident 36-year-old woman who'd built a successful career helping other people navigate trauma and family dysfunction. My parents weren't the middle-aged couple who'd been so easily manipulated by their golden child. They were older, humbler, and devastated by the realization of how completely they'd been deceived. The other family members who'd been financially victimized by Miranda were also stepping forward. My cousin Michael was pursuing his own legal action to recover his stolen college fund. Uncle Robert had already filed a civil suit. Even some of Miranda's friends were coming forward with information about her gambling problems and the lies she'd told to maintain her lifestyle. "She borrowed money from everyone," one former friend told the investigators. "Always had some story about delayed real estate commissions or temporary cash flow problems. But she'd pay it back quickly so nobody suspected she was stealing it from her family." Miranda's response to the investigation was entirely predictable. She blamed everyone else. When police arrested her at her luxury home, she immediately claimed that I had somehow orchestrated the entire investigation as revenge for past family disputes. She accused David of fabricating evidence out of spite over their divorce. She even suggested that Catherine was suffering from dementia and couldn't be trusted as a reliable source. But her most desperate gambit was attempting to manipulate our parents one final time. From jail, she called them collect, crying about how I was destroying the family and begging them to remember all the good times they'd shared. She claimed the evidence against her was fabricated, that David and I had conspired to frame her, and that if they truly loved her, they'd find a way to make this all go away. This time her manipulation tactics failed completely. "I listened to her for about 30 seconds, my father told me grimly. 13 years too late, but I finally heard what you must have heard that night when we accused you. Desperate lies from someone who'd been caught and couldn't face the consequences." My mother's response was even more definitive. "I told her that she'd stolen 13 years from our family, and we weren't going to let her steal anymore. Then I hung up and blocked her number." The investigation was building toward formal charges that could result in significant prison time. But more importantly for me, it was creating space for real healing with my family, not the quick reconciliation that might have happened if Miranda had simply confessed her crimes, but a deeper process of rebuilding trust and understanding. Catherine, despite her illness, was becoming the family's anchor through this process. She organized weekly dinners where we could all process what we'd learned and begin to repair relationships that Miranda had systematically damaged. These gatherings were often emotional and difficult, but they were also the foundation for something Miranda had never been able to destroy: genuine love and connection. The waiting period before trial was agonizing, but it was also transformative. For the first time in 13 years, I felt like I belonged somewhere again. The family I was reconnecting with wasn't the same one I'd lost, and I wasn't the same person who'd been cast out, but maybe that was exactly what we needed to build something stronger than what Miranda had destroyed. The trial began on a crisp October morning, 18 months after Catherine's phone call had shattered Miranda's carefully constructed world. The courthouse was packed with family members, friends, and even some of Miranda's former victims who wanted to see justice served. I sat in the front row with my parents, a position that would have been unimaginable just 2 years earlier. Miranda's defense strategy was as manipulative as everything else she'd done. Her attorney painted her as a troubled woman struggling with gambling addiction, suggesting that her crimes were the result of illness rather than malicious intent. They claimed she'd been planning to pay everything back and that the family's reaction was disproportionate to her mistakes. But prosecutor Maria Santos was thoroughly prepared. She'd spent months building a case that went far beyond simple theft, demonstrating the calculated nature of Miranda's deception and the devastating impact on multiple victims. This was not addiction-driven desperation, Santos argued in her opening statement. This was a 15-year campaign of psychological manipulation and financial abuse designed to enrich the defendant while destroying her sister's relationship with their family. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showing systematic withdrawals that coincided with Miranda's gambling trips. Email exchanges where she bragged about her ability to manipulate family emotions. The forged documents, the fake email addresses, the intercepted communications. Most damning of all were Miranda's own recorded conversations, where she laughed about how easy it was to control our parents and expressed no remorse for the pain she'd caused. When I took the stand to give my victim impact statement, I looked directly at Miranda for the first time in 13 years. She'd aged dramatically since her arrest, her once perfect appearance now haggard and desperate. But what struck me most was the complete absence of remorse in her eyes. Even facing prison time, she seemed angry that her schemes had been discovered, rather than sorry for the harm she'd caused. Miranda didn't just steal money, I told the court, my voice steady despite the emotion behind my words. She stole 13 years of family relationships. She stole my parents' peace of mind, my cousin's financial security, and my own sense of self-worth. But most importantly, she stole our ability to trust each other. I described the years of wondering what was wrong with me that my own family could believe such terrible things. The therapy sessions where I'd tried to understand what I'd done to deserve such complete rejection. The holidays spent alone, the achievements uncelebrated, the grief of believing that my parents had died to me while they were still alive. The defendant's actions didn't just harm me financially, I continued. They were designed to destroy my identity as a daughter, a sister, and a member of this family. The psychological trauma of that betrayal will take years to fully heal. My mother's testimony was perhaps the most powerful. She described 13 years of grief over losing a daughter manipulated by Miranda into believing that cutting contact was the only way to help me learn responsibility. She talked about the birthday cards she'd written, but never sent, the Christmas gifts bought, but never given, the constant ache of missing me that Miranda had convinced her was necessary for everyone's well-being. I failed my youngest daughter, my mother said through tears. I let someone I trusted convince me that love meant abandonment, that protection meant rejection. Miranda didn't just steal money from us. She stole 13 years of loving my child. The defense's attempts to portray Miranda as a victim of her own addiction fell flat when David testified about conversations where she'd coldly calculated how much she could steal without being detected. He described finding gambling receipts hidden throughout their house trips to casinos that she'd funded with stolen family money, and her complete lack of concern for the relatives she was victimizing. She talked about her family like they were marks in a con game, David testified. She'd plan which account to hit next, how much she could take without raising suspicion. When I asked her about her sister, she said Serafina was stupid and naive and deserved whatever happened to her for being so trusting. Even Miranda's former gambling associates testified against her, describing how she'd boasted about having access to unlimited family money and how she'd never face consequences because she'd made sure everyone blamed her sister for any financial irregularities. The most shocking revelation came when investigators testified about discovering Miranda's detailed journals, where she'd documented her manipulation tactics like research notes. She'd written about which emotional triggers worked best on different family members, how to manufacture evidence of my supposed wrongdoing, and her plans for maintaining control over family finances indefinitely. Page after page of calculated manipulation, Detective Rodriguez testified. The defendant treated her family's emotions like a psychological experiment, documenting what lies worked best and how to escalate manipulation when family members showed signs of doubt. Miranda's testimony in her own defense was a disaster. Despite her attorney's advice, she insisted on taking the stand, apparently believing she could manipulate the jury as easily as she'd manipulated our family. Instead, she came across as cold calculating and completely unrepentant. When asked about the intercepted letters I'd sent over the years, Miranda claimed she'd been protecting the family by hiding them. When questioned about the forged bank documents, she insisted she'd only been trying to maintain family harmony. Most tellingly, when asked if she felt any remorse for the pain she'd caused, her answer was revealing. "I did what I thought was best for everyone," she said, her voice carrying the same manipulative tone I remembered from childhood. "If people got hurt, that wasn't my intention." The prosecutor's cross-examination was brutal. Santos walked Miranda through each lie, each manipulation, each stolen dollar, forcing her to either admit her crimes or dig herself deeper with increasingly implausible explanations. "You intercepted birthday cards from your sister to your parents for 13 years. How was that protecting the family? You forged bank documents to make it appear your sister had stolen money. How was that maintaining harmony? You stole your cousin's college fund and your uncle's medical savings. How was that in anyone's best interest?" With each question, Miranda's facade cracked a little more, revealing the calculated manipulator beneath the victim persona her attorney had tried to construct. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned with guilty verdicts on all counts, including aggravated theft, fraud, identity theft, and racketeering, Miranda finally showed genuine emotion. But it wasn't remorse. It was rage. As the bailiffs led her away, she turned to our family section and screamed accusations about conspiracies and betrayal, revealing the true depth of her narcissism and complete inability to accept responsibility for her actions. Judge Patricia Williams sentenced Miranda to 12 years in prison with restitution requirements that would likely take the rest of her life to fulfill. As she handed down the sentence, the judge's words carried the weight of justice finally served. The defendant's crimes were not impulsive acts of desperation, but calculated campaigns of psychological and financial abuse spanning 15 years. The harm inflicted extends far beyond monetary loss to the destruction of fundamental family bonds and the deliberate infliction of emotional trauma on multiple victims. Justice had finally been served, but the real work of healing was just beginning. The immediate aftermath of Miranda's sentencing brought a mixture of relief and reckoning that rippled through every aspect of our family's life. Within hours of the verdict, the local news had picked up the story, and by evening, Miranda's mugshot was circulating on social media with headlines about the family con artist who destroyed her sister's life. David filed for emergency custody of their 8-year-old daughter, Emma, a sweet child who'd been kept largely unaware of her mother's crimes, but was now facing the reality of having a parent in prison. The custody hearing revealed another layer of Miranda's deception. She'd been using Emma as an emotional manipulation tool, coaching her to ask family members for money for school supplies and activities that never materialized. She turned her own daughter into an unwitting accomplice, David told the court, his voice heavy with guilt and anger. Emma would come home from family visits with cash that Miranda claimed was for emergeries or special occasions, but it all went straight to the casino. The financial restitution process was complex and painful. Court-appointed accountants worked to trace every stolen dollar, but the reality was that much of the money was simply gone, what's in casinos, and spent on maintaining Miranda's fabricated lifestyle. The luxury house would be sold, her jewelry and cars auctioned off, but it wouldn't even cover half of what she'd stolen. More devastating was learning about the collateral damage to Miranda's other relationships. Her former real estate colleagues came forward with stories about professional misconduct and client funds that had mysteriously disappeared. The private school where Emma attended revealed that tuition payments had bounced repeatedly, covered up by Miranda's manipulation of their family connections. Even the country club, where Miranda had maintained membership for years, discovered that her dues had been paid with forged checks. She lived like she was wealthy, while systematically destroying every relationship in her life, Catherine observed, as we sat in her garden one evening watching the sunset. The saddest part is that she had everything she needed, family who loved her, a successful husband, a beautiful daughter. But it was never enough. Catherine's cancer was progressing rapidly, and knowing that she'd lived to see justice served brought her a peace that was visible in her final weeks. She'd become the architect of our family's healing, organizing regular dinners and conversations that helped us process not just Miranda's betrayal, but the deeper patterns of dysfunction that had made her manipulation possible. We enabled her for years, my father admitted during one of these gatherings. Every time someone questioned her stories or suggested she might be having problems, we shut it down because we wanted to believe she was perfect. The truth was that Miranda's golden child status had been earned through years of strategic manipulation and careful image management. She'd learned early how to tell our parents exactly what they wanted to hear, while presenting herself as the responsible, successful daughter who could do no wrong. When problems arose, she'd developed an arsenal of excuses and explanations that family members accepted because questioning them meant admitting they'd been deceived. She played on our deepest fears, my mother realized with painful clarity. She convinced us that losing you was necessary to protect the family, but really she was protecting herself from being exposed. The impact on extended family was equally devastating. Cousins who'd idolized Miranda's apparent success were forced to confront that their role model had been a criminal. Aunts and uncles who'd contributed to family funds discovered that their generosity had been funding gambling addiction and luxury purchases. The annual family reunion that Miranda had organized for years was revealed to have been funded entirely with stolen money. But perhaps the most heartbreaking discovery was how Miranda had systematically destroyed relationships between other family members, not just between me and our parents. She'd spread lies and manufactured conflicts to keep everyone isolated and suspicious of each other, ensuring that nobody would compare stories or question inconsistencies in her narrative. She told me that you blamed me for not defending you, my cousin Michael revealed. She said you thought I was weak for not standing up to your parents. I believed her, and I felt too guilty to reach out when I started having doubts about what really happened. She told me you'd said I was jealous of your education and success, Uncle Robert added. She painted everyone as enemies of everyone else, keeping us all apart, so we couldn't see the bigger picture. The financial recovery process was complicated by the fact that Miranda had been so careful to make her thefts look like legitimate transactions or honest mistakes. Some of the stolen money could be traced and recovered through insurance claims and asset seizures, but much of it was simply gone forever. More importantly, we were all grappling with the psychological aftermath of learning how completely we'd been manipulated. Family's therapy sessions became a regular occurrence as we worked to rebuild trust and communication patterns that Miranda had deliberately corrupted. The hardest part isn't forgiving Miranda, my mother explained during one session. The hardest part is forgiving ourselves for being so easily manipulated and for the pain we caused Serafina. I was struggling with my own complex emotions. The vindication felt good, but it was complicated by grief for the years we'd lost and anger about time that could never be recovered. There were moments when the injustice felt overwhelming, not just because of what Miranda had done, but because of how long it had taken for the truth to come out. My therapist helped me understand that healing from this kind of systematic betrayal would take time and patience with myself and my family. You were all victims of an extremely sophisticated manipulator, she reminded me. The fact that you're here working together to rebuild is actually remarkable. The media attention was intense but brief. Miranda's case had all the elements that made for compelling news: family betrayal, stolen money, decades of deception, and ultimate justice. For a few weeks, we were approached by journalists and documentary filmmakers wanting to tell our story, but we declined most requests, focusing instead on our private healing process. Catherine passed away peacefully in December, 6 months after Miranda's sentencing. Her funeral was the first family gathering I'd attended in 14 years, and it was bittersweet to realize that the woman who'd made our reconciliation possible wouldn't be there to see the full restoration of our family bonds. She always believed this day would come, my father said, as we stood by her grave. She never stopped believing that love would win in the end. But even in grief, there was hope. Emma was thriving in David's custody, finally free from her mother's toxic influence. The family relationships that Miranda had worked so hard to destroy were slowly healing. And for the first time in over a decade, we were building something based on truth rather than manipulation. The collapse of Miranda's criminal empire had been complete and final. Now came the harder work of healing and moving forward. 3 years have passed since Miranda's sentencing, and the transformation in our family has been nothing short of miraculous. What started as a quest for justice has evolved into something much more profound, a complete rebuilding of relationships based on honesty, accountability, and genuine love, rather than manipulation and fear. My relationship with my parents has deepened in ways I never thought possible. The shared trauma of discovering how thoroughly we'd all been deceived created a foundation for conversations we'd never been able to have before Miranda's crimes came to light. They've worked tirelessly to understand not just what happened, but how they could have been so thoroughly manipulated, attending family therapy sessions and reading books about psychological manipulation to ensure they'd never fall victim to such deception again. "We lost 13 years with you," my mother said recently. "But we gained something too. We learned who you really are, not the person Miranda convinced us you were. The woman you became during those years alone, the strength and compassion and resilience you developed, that's something we might never have fully appreciated if we'd never lost you." My father, who'd always struggled with emotional expression, has become surprisingly open about his feelings and regrets. He writes me letters now, something he'd never done before, sharing memories from my childhood and expressing pride in the woman I became despite their abandonment. These letters have become treasured possessions, tangible proof that love persevered even when it was buried under lies and manipulation. The extended family healing has been equally remarkable. Family gatherings are now genuine celebrations rather than the carefully orchestrated performances Miranda used to stage. We've started new traditions that focus on authenticity and connection rather than appearances and competition. Monthly dinners at different family members' homes have replaced the elaborate events Miranda used to plan, and the conversations are deeper and more meaningful than any we'd had during her reign of deception. My cousin Michael and I have become particularly close bonded by our shared experience of being Miranda's victims. He's used the partial recovery of his stolen college fund to finally pursue graduate school at age 34, and I've been able to help him navigate the financial aid process using skills I developed during my years of independence. "She stole our past," Michael said recently, "but she can't steal our future. What we're building now is stronger than what we had before because it's real." David has been instrumental in Emma's healing process, and I've been amazed by my 8-year-old niece's resilience. With proper therapy and the support of family members who genuinely love her, she's blossomed into a happy, confident child who's learning that family means safety and honesty rather than secrets and manipulation. "Aunt Serafina," she asked me during a recent family barbecue, "why did my mommy lie about you?" The question broke my heart, but it also represented hope. Emma was learning to ask direct questions and expect honest answers, something that had been impossible in Miranda's household. "Sometimes people make choices that hurt other people," I told her carefully. "But the important thing is that we're all here together now, and we love you very much." The legal aftermath continues to unfold slowly. Miranda is serving her 12-year sentence at a women's correctional facility about 200 miles away. None of us have visited her, though David maintains minimal contact for Emma's sake. According to his reports, she continues to maintain her innocence and blame everyone else for her situation, showing no signs of genuine remorse or rehabilitation. The financial restitution process has recovered about 30% of the stolen money, which has been distributed among the victims according to a court-ordered formula. For me, the money wasn't the point, but for some family members like Uncle Robert, even partial recovery has made a significant difference in their retirement security. More importantly, we've all learned valuable lessons about recognizing manipulation and protecting ourselves from future predators. The family has developed new communication norms that emphasize direct conversation and fact-checking, making it much harder for anyone to isolate family members or control information flow. My career has taken an unexpected turn as well. My experience with family manipulation and the legal system has led to opportunities to work with other families dealing with similar situations. I've testified in several cases involving financial abuse by family members, and I'm currently working on a book about recognizing and recovering from family betrayal. "Your story gives people hope," my editor told me recently. "It shows that even the most devastating family betrayal can be overcome with truth and persistence." The book has been therapeutic to write, but also challenging. Reliving the pain and confusion of those 13 years of exile has been difficult, but it's also helped me process emotions I'd buried for years. More importantly, it's given me a platform to help other people who've experienced similar betrayals. I've received hundreds of emails from people who've read early chapters, sharing their own stories of family manipulation and financial abuse. Many of them express the same feelings I lived with for years: confusion about what they did wrong, grief over lost relationships, and desperation to understand how people who claimed to love them could treat them so cruelly. "Your story helped me realize I wasn't crazy," one woman wrote. "My brother has been stealing from my elderly mother and convincing her that I'm the problem. Reading about your experience gave me the courage to contact authorities and push for an investigation." These connections have helped me understand that what happened to our family wasn't unique or isolated. Family financial abuse is surprisingly common, often enabled by the same dynamics that allowed Miranda to operate for so long: reluctance to question family members, pressure to maintain family unity, and the assumption that blood relationships guarantee trustworthiness. As I finish writing this story, I'm sitting in the kitchen of the house where I grew up, having Sunday dinner with my parents for the first time in over 14 years. The conversation flows easily now, filled with laughter and genuine affection, rather than the careful politeness that characterized our early reunification attempts. Emma is coloring at the kitchen table, occasionally asking for help with difficult words or showing us her artistic creations. She calls this house the family house and considers it her second home, a safe place where adults tell the truth and keep their promises. Looking around this table, I see what Miranda tried so hard to destroy, but ultimately couldn't: genuine love and connection that survives even the most devastating betrayal. We're not the same family we were before her crimes came to light, and in many ways that's a blessing. We're stronger, more honest, and more intentional about protecting the relationships that matter most. The 13 years we lost can never be recovered, but the years ahead stretch before us full of possibility. We've learned that justice isn't always swift, but it's often more complete than we dare to hope. Family isn't just about blood. It's about choice, commitment, and the courage to face truth together. Have you ever experienced family betrayal that made you question everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you? Drop a comment below and let me know how you found the strength to rebuild trust. Your story might help someone else who's struggling with similar pain. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family trauma and finding justice. Share this with anyone who needs to know that even the most devastating betrayal can be overcome with truth, persistence, and the support of people who genuinely love you. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and justice. Remember, your worth isn't determined by other people's treatment of you, and sometimes the family you choose becomes stronger than the family you were born into. Until next time, stay strong and keep believing that truth always finds a way to surface.